to another version of the Bible vlog. Today we are starting in Mark chapter 6. Let's go ahead and dive right in. So chapter 6 starts off and more people are starting to know who Jesus is. Fame about him is starting to spread everywhere. So in chapter 6, Jesus decides to go back to his hometown of Nazareth where he was raised and where everybody knew that he was from.
I'm back, baby! I'm back!
So as Jesus comes into Nazareth, he begins teaching in the synagogue, and everyone in Nazareth has a very interesting reaction to Jesus' teaching. Now look at verse 2. It says, "Many were astonished, saying, 'Where did this man,'" talking about Jesus, "'get these things? And what wisdom is that which is given to him that such mighty works are performed by his hands?'" In verse 3, "Is this not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us?" So they were offended at him. Jesus is from Nazareth, and all of these people have known Jesus literally since he was a child. Jesus was originally born in Bethlehem, but moved to Nazareth when he was a small child, which is where he was raised. All of these people that are now watching Jesus teach in the synagogue say, "Who in the world does Jesus think that he is? We know who this guy is. We grew up with Jesus. I'm friends with his sister. He made a dining table that's in my kitchen." Now, something interesting in verse 3 is that this is the only mention of Jesus' occupation, which is that of a carpenter. But to these people back then, carpenter not only meant working with wood, but it also meant working with stone and metal. It clearly suggests that Jesus learned this trade from his earthly father, Joseph. Now, something else I want to point out here that is very interesting is that it calls Jesus the son of Mary. There's no indication of Joseph from this point forward in any of the Gospels. It's safe to discern that at this point, Joseph had probably died. Now, we don't know from what, we don't know how it happened, but the Bible even tells us that Jesus was a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. In other words, he knew heartache. You know, so many times we think like, oh, if Jesus were just alive today, then he could understand my pain. If Jesus knew what it was like to lose a loved one, then he would understand what I'm going through. And yet we can read in the Bible and see that at some point, Jesus had to grow up without an earthly father. So for those of you who have experienced loss or you've gone through very trying circumstances, understand this. Jesus went through some of these same things literally as a child. So once the residents of Nazareth start questioning who does Jesus think that he is, look at what Jesus says in verse 4. "But Jesus said to them, 'A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house.'" You know what Jesus is saying here? That when it comes to your own family, your own friends, and people who have known you for a long time, it's very hard to have influence in their lives. We're going to look at two more miracles that Jesus did that both of them individually are truly amazing in their own right. So the first one is the feeding of the 5,000. We read about that Jesus and his disciples actually go out to a little bit of a deserted place to try and just take a break and get some rest. But the Bible says that people saw Jesus and his disciples departing and then got to this deserted place before they even arrived. So when Jesus and the disciples actually arrive here, it says that Jesus was moved with compassion on the people because he saw how desperate they were in their situation for him. All of these people had come out to see Jesus, and even though he's trying to take a break, even though Jesus is trying to rest, he's moved with compassion on the people. So he sits down and he starts teaching them. Well, as evening progresses, everybody starts to realize we are in a deserted place. We're not anywhere near our homes. Not just Jesus and the disciples, but everybody who came out to hear Jesus. They don't know what they're going to do to eat. They don't know where they're going to sleep. And so everybody kind of turns to Jesus and basically says, you know, what are we going to do? So look at verse 35. The disciples come to Jesus and they say, "The day is now spent. This is a deserted place and already the hour is late. Send them away, Jesus, that they may go into the surrounding country and villages and buy themselves bread, for they don't have anything to eat." It's dinner time, Jesus. Now, Jesus actually says something kind of funny in verse 37, and I can see Jesus just kind of being exhausted. He's tired. He's trying to take a break. Even though he's moved with compassion for people, he still needs some rest. You know, I can imagine Jesus looking at the disciples like, "I'm a carpenter, not a cook, boys." But look at in verse 37. So Jesus' response to the disciples, it says, "But he answered and said to them, 'You give them something to eat.'" Now I can imagine Jesus is probably like a little bit frustrated here, just kind of like, you know, I've been teaching all day. I've been taking care of these people. Why don't you do something? But of course the disciples say, you know, we don't have the money to do that. How are we going to get that much food for this many people? So Jesus says, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when the disciples found out, "We have 5 loaves and 2 fish." Now watch what Jesus does. He looked up to heaven, blessed it, and broke the loaves and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. What literally happened was this food kept multiplying. Every time they broke a piece of bread, there was more bread. Every time they broke the fish, there was more fish. Now some people look at these things and they say, "That's impossible." There's a quote by St. Augustine that I love, and he says, "Miracles are not in contradiction to nature. They are in contradiction to what we know about nature. Now look at verse 42. It says, so they all ate and were filled, and they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and the fish. Now this is just like Jesus. Every time that God performs a miracle, you will find that it is always more than enough. Jesus doesn't just do the minimum. God doesn't just perform a miracle to just get you by and just give you exactly what you need. God is a God of abundance. He does more than is necessary. Have you ever gone out and you've looked at the stars at night? Is that necessary? No. Did God need to create every kind of animal and different species that we see on the planet? No. Did he need to make all the different various types of trees that we have? Did he need to make all the different fruits and foods and vegetables and all the different things that we can enjoy on this planet? No. But God is a God of excess. David wrote about God in Psalms and he said, my cup runs over. In other words, when you've had all that you can have, he keeps pouring into your cup so that it starts spilling over onto the table. This is God's nature in that he's more than enough for your needs, more than enough for everybody's needs. God can do anything that we need and then far exceedingly above and beyond that. Now, one more section that we're going to look at is the part about Jesus actually walking on the water. Now, of course, this is probably one of the most famous miracles that Jesus did, was walking on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus sends his disciples out on a boat to go out ahead of him, and it says that he goes up on a mountaintop to pray. Now, I don't know why Jesus insists on continuing to freak out his disciples on the water. At first, Jesus falls asleep in a boat and they think that they're going to drown. Next, they finally land the boat and then a demon-possessed guy meets him on the shoreline. Now they're back out on the boat without Jesus, thinking, okay, maybe everything's going to be okay this time. Then Jesus starts walking across the Sea of Galilee to them, and of course, it's in the middle of the night. Now look at verse 48. About the fourth watch of the night. Fourth watch refers to between 3 and 6 a.m. in the morning. So it was night. It was pitch black. These disciples are rowing on the Sea of Galilee against the wind through the night, trying to make it back to the shore, and all of a sudden one of them spots something off in the distance, and it's a dude walking on the water. Now put yourself in their positions in the boat. What would you do? I might be getting out of the boat. I might be rowing harder. Needless to say, I would be freaking out, and especially if they were walking towards my boat. Now, I could be totally wrong on this. This is not the Bible. This is my own interpretation and my own thoughts. I think Jesus liked to mess with his disciples sometimes. Think about it. If you are the Son of God and you know that you have the ability to walk on water, would you not use it to your advantage every once in a while just to have some fun with people? Maybe this is what Jesus is doing. I don't know, but he seems to have this running joke going on with his disciples in a boat on the water. So in verse 48, it says, he came to them walking on the sea and would have passed them by. And when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were troubled. Naturally. But immediately Jesus talked with them and said, be of good cheer, it is I. Again, do not be afraid. Just like he told the parents of the little girl that died, do not fear, only believe. It's me, it's Jesus. Don't be afraid. Then Jesus gets into the boat with them, the wind stops, and it says that the disciples are amazed beyond measure and marveled. Imagine, this is twice now that you've been out on the Sea of Galilee, thinking that you're going to die. Jesus gets into the boat, wakes up, rebukes the wind, and everything goes back to normal. And this time, Jesus wasn't just with you on the boat, he walked to you on the water. You know, I will say this in closing. I think sometimes we read about the miracles of Jesus in the Bible and we just say, wow, that was amazing for back then. Of course, those things don't happen nowadays. I am here to tell you today, Jesus is still in the miracle performing business. He wants to meet you where you are. He wants to help you with your needs. Things that you don't even think that Jesus cares about, and he truly does. He is interested in every aspect of your life. He wants to be there. He wants to assist you. He finds you interesting. Yes, you. He doesn't just love you, but he likes you. He likes being around you, and he wants to be a part of your everyday life. Listen, if you have never come to Christ before, maybe you're watching this for the first time and you just say, man, I don't know much about this Jesus thing. I'm telling you, he's here for you today. All you have to do is come to Jesus and just say, Lord, I want to know who you are. Jesus, I want to know more about you, and he will come into your life. He'll make you a new person. It is the greatest decision you can ever make in your life, is following Jesus Christ. He's amazing. The best decision I ever made in my life was to follow Jesus Christ. He changed me from the inside out. Guys, thank you as always for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed Mark 6. This is a beautiful gospel. I love going through the book of Mark. Come back tomorrow. We're going to pick it right back up on Mark chapter 7.